hope that this disease is ended and you are going to join us in our town in Basra in the next meeting, not like this one online. We prepare a lecture which is about our message to improve our learning in the future, because we don't know what's going to happen within the next year. We prepare ourselves that the same situation will be, that students will not attend the campus, and we will depend on not e-learning alone, but we depend on something else, especially in the medical schools. Both teaching and learning methods must be restricted for the students to improve their grades and have a bright academic future. And this is what we mean by embracing the point of the clinical part of the learning. Undergraduates are no longer engaged in class because their attention is repurposed online. Everything is online, not only teaching, because of this era. So they don't pay attention because teachers often focus too much on the theoretical part of a class. We as teachers should move from the traditional methods to new ones, taking in consideration the internet-minded students with the new technologies and coexisting COVID-19 pandemic, as we mentioned, which prevent the students from joining us in the physical or actual classes. It was a challenging decision to choose the type of learning to meet the requirements with a better outcome of stakeholders, that our graduates should be able to use their abilities and skills to join their future in the hospitals, clinics, and so forth. If they want to travel abroad, to study outside, to complete their higher educations, and so forth. To have a summary of what we have done as a questionnaire for our students about e-learning and its technologies, we start from this white part of the chart. This is the only number of our students to start with, 29%. They are eager or want to learn with electronic learning, while the majority, 71%, the yellow one, is not accepting the electronic learning. But we have no choice. If we didn't do that, we will lose the year. And successfully, thanks for God and everyone who helped us, we completed the previous year, and our students are doing well, and we will try to prepare them with some clinical skills that is lost during the last year. And the same thing for the other charts or questionnaire. You can see most of the students, this is the whitish one is the acceptance, and the other one is the refusal or the abilities. If you have any ability to deal with e-learning, most of the students, 75%, have no abilities to deal with it because of their previous dependence on the physical learning. And about the e-learning and its technologies, and we ask our students, still they are not accepting that. And the last one, the last part of the chart, showing that 73% expecting that the electronic learning in Basra University will face a lot of difficulties and problems. As you know, we have the difficulties in internet and its speed. We have the difficulties in electricity. We have difficulties in the economic situation of our students to have all these expensive technologies for learning. So still we are doing a negotiation with the students in order to prepare them for the electronic learning and to have their equipment with them by doing our best with all our colleagues to supply them with the laptops or iPads or mobiles and internet lines to complete their e-learning. And this is the slide which we again have the idea of the students about they have any sufficient information about e-learning. As you can see, 18% only have this part of teaching, because we have one of the colleges, which is Al-Zahra Medical College, is dependent on the integrated learning. So their teaching is, from the start, is depending on e-learning and physical learning. So 18% of our students are having sufficient information about the e-learning to start with, I mean, in the previous year. And these are the most important calls they can use or they can depend on. As you can see, the free conference call is used very little, about 5% only, while the PDF type of learning or lectures was very widely or diffusely used by the teachers and the students, because it is easy to start with. But later on, and the other one is the Telegram, because again, this is preferred by the students. So we want to go with them, with their line. We don't want to lose the students. We go with the call or the conference call, and we leave it, and we go with the WhatsApp and the PDF and the Telegram, because they usually attending at that stages, and we use them to learn in these charts, and then we change to our type of learning, which is we will tell you about it in the next lectures. Again, about our teachers, we have their questionnaire about their expectations in the next year, what they will expect in the next year, that the optimum type of learning. And as you can see, 71% of our teachers recommend the hybrid type of learning. 29% they don't accept this type of learning. Still, they are insisting on the physical attendance of the lectures. We have, for the future, there are many types of learning which can help us in the medical type, the medical learning, and especially for the clinical aspect of learning, which is important in the 6th year, 5th and 6th year, to join the hospitals and to have their experience with the work. And the most accepted one is the blended learning, which is going to combine the electronic learning for the theoretical aspect and 2 days per week attendance for small groups from 15 to 20 students in the college or the hospital, with the safety equipments, with the mask and all of these equipments to prevent social distance and so forth, to prevent the cross-infection or contact with each other. So blended learning is the one which we choose in the future or in the next year, inshallah. Blended learning is also often called hybrid learning or mixed mode of learning. It is a mixture between the traditional teaching in a class and e-learning, as we mentioned, with small groups. And the students learned about the topic and the theory at home. So there is more time for the teacher to do their exercises and to do the clinical aspect later on. And the message is to improve teaching skills and technologies, is to improve the students. We are doing our best to improve our teachers' skills in the electronic learning, and to have our labs equipped with the minimum attendance of the students to prevent cross-infection. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Saad Hammadi. أسمعك دكتور. Thank you very much, Professor Saad Hammadi, the Chancellor of Basra University, for this nice and valuable presentation. And now we will go to our next guest speaker, Professor Isabel from Malta. You hear me, Professor?
I certainly can. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us today.
Not at all. I'm very, very, very pleased to meet you all. And I hope you can all hear me. I will share my screen, if I may, and begin this presentation by...
Okay, Professor. Just I want to introduce you to attendees. Okay?
Yes.
Give me 1 minute, please, and then start your presentation. Professor Isabel, she is a gynecologist from Malta, teaches anatomy at the Faculty of Medicine and Surgery at the University of Malta, and she is currently director of the International School for Foundation Studies and Medical Foundation Program. And her main research interests are in medical education. Her teaching and research experience have led to invitation to serve as a referee for major journals and sorry, there is something with the wrong with the net. And she is the author of over 60 publications in the peer-reviewed literature. Thank you, Professor Isabel, again, and then you can start your presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the introduction. I hope you can. Happy to meet you all, of course, and we can continue our conversation through the chat afterwards. We've divided up this topic so that my colleagues that will come after me will talk specifically about clinical education, although I will touch upon this a little bit. But I would like to focus primarily on the preclinical world. So I'll start with a few pretty pictures of where I come from, and ask you, to think about this. Why should we get in front of a class to tell them something that they can read? Okay, I think that there is a great deal of information out there in the literature, in books, in videos, in all sorts of technological options. So why do we really need to physically be there in front of the class? Before we go much further, I'd like to explain a couple of definitions so that we're all clear on this. This has already been talked about in the gracious introduction that we received. So the traditional approach, of course, is a face-to-face approach. The blended approach is one where we combine the face-to-face approach when absolutely necessary, and that is the key. When is it absolutely necessary? Together with electronic teaching of some sort, and we will talk about what those options might be. Two more terms I'd like to bring in. One is the word synchronous, which means that if we are talking about online teaching and learning, then it is live. In other words, I have the students in front of me on Zoom or on Teams or on any other video platform. The other option is asynchronous learning, which is where students are provided with links, they're provided with tasks, they're provided with videos to watch and respond to, and they learn through self-paced learning that takes them however long it's going to take. Today, I will talk about three main areas: teaching, of course, learning, and assessment. So the first thing I did when I started looking at this was to see, well, I've got a bit of white hair here, so I've been around a little while, and I wonder how long this has been around. And in fact, computer-assisted learning, which was the old terminology for e-learning, has been around for quite a long time. I found one paper here referring to teaching in dentistry, but obviously it applies to medicine, going back to 1981. That was the year I graduated as a medical doctor. So this quote here from this gentleman, computer-assisted learning should not replace traditional education, but be used as a supplement for self-directed studies. Well, absolutely right. Let us also not forget that the students in front of us are not children. They are adults for the most part. Most of them are over 18. Most of them are therefore able to distinguish between what is important and what is not. Sometimes they have difficulties, and that's why we're here. But adults want to learn experimentally. They want to problem solve. They want to handle things themselves. And they learn best when whatever it is we're teaching them has immediate value. Of course, that is that's the ideal situation. On the right-hand side, you see your average student going, oh my God, how am I going to cope with all this information? So what are the two main constraints that I think we have currently, not only in preclinical, but also in clinical education? One is time, because the curriculum is absolutely jam-packed. So there's no time to actually deal with topics that we want to add. And the second, of course, is COVID, which has caused a great deal of consternation here. But medical students, dental students, or all kinds of health sciences students are adults, and I think they are open to new methods of learning. And it is our role, I believe, it is our responsibility to encourage these students to become active learners rather than passive learners, which most of them are, okay? Our role is also, or challenge in fact, is to adopt these new teaching methods while maintaining the excellence that we know we can achieve. So essentially, it's about going from the sage on the stage, which is where most of us are, right? We stand in front of students and we speak as though we know it all, to being someone who is more by the side of the students. The technical term here is guide by the side. And instead of lecturing all the time, we are in fact facilitating their learning. We are facilitators of learning. This, of course, requires us to have mastered the use of technology, and this is where some of us, fall short. And we also have to have learned and realized what are the not only advantages but also disadvantages of the technology that we are using. As an aside, you're probably aware that originally e-learning was promoted in order to save costs and increase efficiency, right? You can have lots of students all doing the same thing all the time. You don't need to be physically be with them while they're doing this. This has already been alluded to, and I really must emphasize this. It is so important. This is the so-called learning pyramid, adapted from a publication that's at least 30 years old. So this is where we mostly are. We normally lecture to students, right? And in fact, when we think about lecturing to students, this is how much of the information they retain. Very, very little. Not more than 5%, 10% or whatever. Clearly, as you go down the learning pyramid or go down towards the bottom, reading, they retain a little bit more. Any audiovisual tools where they're actually watching a video or interacting with a video, they're learning and retaining a little bit more. And the further down you go further down the pyramid you go, excuse my English, the greater the retention of knowledge. And look at where we are at the very bottom, teaching others. So once students are forced, because we have to force them, to teach each other through what's called peer teaching and peer learning, that is when they really and truly retain material. I don't have to tell you, it's very difficult to actually teach something that you don't know. I'm sure you've tried it. I've tried it, say, oh yeah, I'll give a lecture on so-and-so because someone's can't take it. Yeah, I'll take over, no problem. But actually, if I don't know the subject very well, it's not a very good lecture, right? So let's moving on. One possible blended learning approach, one that we have chosen at our university. It's a series of steps. And of course, this is not written in stone. We chose this because it makes sense for us, but of course it may not make sense for you. First of all, we need the students to acquire basic knowledge. Now, how can they do this? Yes, they need to attend relevant lectures, emphasis on the relevant. It is not necessary to lecture students about material that they can read in the books. What they need are lectures on material that is difficult. difficult. If you're talking anatomy, for example, I don't need to tell you about how, what the attachments of this muscle and that muscle are. You can get that in the books. You can watch a video. But if I'm trying to explain the orientation of the pterygopalatine fossa, which is really quite complicated, then that might be a good idea for me to lecture, to give you a lecture or to explain. So anyway, attending relevant lectures, followed by obviously using textbooks and other self-directed learning modules. But it's not enough. The next step is to give them some cases, some clinically relevant cases to whatever it is they're learning, whether it's the relevant anatomy, the physiology, the pathology, microbiology, some cases. I'm not talking about problem-based learning here. I'm talking about case-based learning. And then on a weekly basis, they will have interactive discussions, again, online, because it is quite, it's quite fine to do this online. Hold on, let me turn on the fan because it's getting hot here. Online, followed by dissection sessions for anatomy, and of course the equivalent in physiology or pathology, hands-on sessions, let's call that, where students rotate around various stations. Here, of course, we need to bear in mind the COVID restrictions. So in our university, we have put students in very small bubbles of 4. They obviously have to wear protection, and they have to stay in the very same bubbles for the whole of the academic year. And then finally, they will practice relevant clinical skills on each other. So that's one possible blended learning approach. Let's not forget that there are so many educational tools out there for self-paced learning. Many of them are free. And what we know is that students, in fact, really love them. They love to play with these tools. They can, of course, they can use them at any time, at any place. They can also be used interactively, so one student or group of students with each other. And the beauty of them is that they can address the different types of learning styles that students have. Some students are visual learners, some are mostly auditory learners, but most students are kinesthetic learners. They like to do things, and when they do things, they're more likely to remember. The issue of a flipped classroom was brought up, and I think this is extremely important. For those of you who don't know what that is, very briefly, what this means is that the material is provided beforehand. Students have the opportunity to learn, to read, to learn, to understand. And then when they come to the class, that class session, whether it's a face-to-face class or or online, that time is spent problem solving. Either the tutor answering questions of students who have not understood, or the other way around, the students being asked questions by the tutor to make sure they have understood. So other advantages of these e-learning tools, many of them also have self-assessment components. So they can answer questions as they go along, which means they know, in fact, whether they've learned this or not. There's no doubt that these tools are particularly suited to subjects that are difficult to conceptualize. For example, complex biochemical processes, microscopic images, or of course, gross anatomy. Not every aspect of of medical teaching is in fact suitable for this type of e-learning approach. The other advantage, and I don't have to tell you, is that students can do this at their own pace, which means that it's particularly useful for the weaker student, the student who is in fact struggling to capture all the materials. Now, there are obviously some basic requirements. You do need to have an electronic management system, and the one that was introduced to us a couple of weeks ago in Tehran was really quite amazing because it allowed all sorts of interactions between the participants and the tutors. So the option of video conferencing, discussion boards, email, etc., etc. Clearly, you also need training. Both students and the teaching staff need to be trained how to use this. Fairly simple, but they need training. And this is really the most important thing, really, senior management, the senior administrators need to engage with this and agree that it is a good idea. There are some disadvantages, and you've already mentioned some of them in the introduction. Of course, there are internet issues, bandwidth especially. It is extremely time consuming for tutors to engage in online discussions with students, especially in small groups. It's very easy to enter a discussion board and write an email or respond to all students at once. But if you want the students to be working in small groups, and you want each of those small groups to be independent of each other, so they're not copying, right? They are learning independently within a small group. You actually need to respond to each of those groups, which can take a great deal of time. It is a major disadvantage. Yes, it does require a cultural change in learning practice. It's not easy for everyone. And as I said, there may be some administrative obstacles. I will mention them later. There is the issue of copyright as well. There needs to be an agreed policy by the university on intellectual property rights. Who owns this material? Do I own it? Is it owned by the university? Who can disseminate this? And who can, in fact, spread it outside the university environment? One last disadvantage, I don't have to tell you this, it can be frustrating, it can be time consuming. You click here, you click there, and things don't happen. Just this morning, I was giving a lecture. I was supposed to give a lecture at 9 o'clock. I couldn't enter the Zoom room because the secretary had disabled hosting rights and I just couldn't get in. So she had to transfer the hosting right. You know, these are small things, but they get in the way of progress. So I think that technological innovations, as you know, they're welcome to students. Students love them. Okay, this is the digital generation. But, and I think most of you would probably agree with me, that they cannot entirely replace hands-on sessions or lectures, but perhaps replace some of them. So there are some challenges here. We need to create new ways of work within our respective institutions, especially if they are resistant to change. I hope yours are not. Mine has been a little bit resistant, but we're getting there slowly. This resistance comes from a number of places. Some of it is fear of the unknown. Some of it is due to their underlying values. They have different values than yours. They have different ways of thinking. They have different management styles. But essentially, and this is the key on this slide, is how do we make it happen? Well, first of all, we need to create that readiness for change. And that comes from seminars like this, where people like yourselves and myself learn how that it is in fact possible and move that message along. So energizing the commitment within your own faculties, within your own universities. It helps sometimes to obtain political support, here political with a small p, not politics outside, but politics within the university. Of course, you or someone needs to manage that transition from complete face-to-face to blended learning, and it will probably fall on your shoulders, the shoulders of the people who are mostly committed to this. And after that, you also have to sustain the momentum, keep it going, you know, week after week, month after month. From the student's point of view, and I do want to mention this because it's really quite important. After all, we are here for our students. There is a great deal of anxiety and uncertainty in the minds of students. There's issue of personal safety. There are issues of continuity of learning. They are fearful and understanding of, you know, we understand how they feel. And then there are two other issues I want to bring up. One is that some students lose themselves in this virtual environment. They literally, you don't see them anymore. They switch off, you lose them. Others, on the other hand, find themselves. They are the ones who actually realize that, you know, they are where they are and they are doing the right thing, they're learning. Some students will perceive that virtual seminar group, if they're in a small group, as a warm, friendly, supportive place, a place where they can share. Others, especially females, I must say, will perceive themselves as facing a whole sea of strangers, and they are extremely unhappy in this environment. So we need to be aware of what students, how students feel about this. I won't spend too much time on this, but basically there are stages of competence in online learning from level 1 to level 5, and it's the level 5 students that we want, one who takes responsibility for their own learning, is able to set up and support their own virtual group. I will of course be sharing all these slides with you, so don't worry, you'll be able to read these at your leisure. So in terms of process, in terms of the curriculum process, I think it's important that we decide, you decide beforehand, at the very beginning, which part of the curriculum are we going to deliver face-to-face and which part are we going to use e-learning for. And there is a very delicate balance here, which will vary from location to location. We need to consider the learning outcomes of that particular unit that you are teaching. We have to consider the level of the student, of course, the electronic resources, as you said before, and the students' abilities, their own computer skills. One of the things that we learned through the pandemic lockdown in March, April, and May was that asking students to type their answers meant that it took them much, much longer to answer questions. Many students don't type. They use a phone. They use their thumbs to manipulate a phone, but they're not used to typing on the screen. Okay. Yes, we need to invest in staff development. Okay, this cannot happen on its own, and it cannot happen only with you. You are essentially the people who will need to then train other people to do this. It helps to create a central resource base. There is no point in everybody reinventing the wheel here. I have materials that I have prepared, and I'm more than happy to share them with you. Equally, I'm sure there are many of you out there who have materials. We need to share them because that is the quickest way to be up and running. Once we have created these materials, we can integrate them with the traditional learning processes. One last thing, which I think is really important, is we need to incentivize, because staff who become, as I put it here, active members of this virtual campus, right? The staff who are really putting in all this effort should be compensated for in some way, because it does take a lot more time than simply standing in front of a class and giving a lecture. So we should consider, including this as a maybe, one of the criteria for promotion, which we all would like to have. So practical issues now, logistics issues, if I may. This is what we've decided to do, basically. Lectures and critical thinking sessions, which is where we ask students to work on cases, are live, Zoomed, and recorded. So no face-to-face teaching here, all online, but it is recorded on Zoom so they can listen to it again. For practical sessions, whether they are dissections or clinical skills sessions, students in small bubbles and the same small bubbles. Timetable organized in such a way that each small group of students only needs to come on campus very few times a week, preferably only once, to minimize the number of people who are actually entering and exiting the university. Spacing in corridors, making sure that they do stay 2 meters apart, very difficult, but we need to do that. Issues like, don't bring a whole bunch of stuff with you. Keep your computer at home, leave your book at home. Just come and interact with us on that day. I'm sure many countries have introduced a contact tracing app. We certainly have. Keep it running so that if we do have a positive case, then we can contact trace very quickly. In terms of assessment, and I will come to that now, what are some of the challenges of online assessment? I don't have to tell you this. You have all been through these problems yourselves last May and June. So some of the issues. First of all, flexibility. I think it's been said that ideally we should stick to MCQs and true false questions because these can be corrected. I disagree. I don't think we should be sticking only to those forms of assessment. Of course, we should use them, but I think we can, in fact, use short answer questions with some case studies. And what you do then is you ask the students to scan the answers and email them to you with free software. Yes, of course, you cannot completely eliminate cheating, but there is another possible solution for that. Clearly, students have to be given the opportunity to practice, either through formative assessment and reflection, and certainly preliminary testing, testing the system before they actually take the exam. There are technical issues. I don't have to tell you what they are. There is that issue, and that is a very practical one that we would need to consider. I would like to talk a little bit about student stress, because remember, the whole point of an assessment is to find out what the student knows, not what they don't know. We want to know what they know. And once they are stressed, extremely stressed by the exam, especially if their slow typing speed is getting in the way with their time management, then they become even more stressed. The students need to trust us and the exam, and that means that trust must be earned. We must earn their trust by working with them before the exam to convince them that we will be safe. That they will be safe. How to minimize cheating? You've all got your own ideas, and I'm sure some of these things are already things you're doing. But for me, number one is not the stick, but the carrot, okay? If we ask questions that are, and I will give you some examples in a moment, that are higher Bloom taxonomy questions, you cannot. It's far, far, far less easy to cheat there. Okay, I'll give you some examples. If you are going to use multiple choice questions, then yes, you can have multiple sets of questions at the same level of difficulty, which you randomly send to students. You can shuffle questions, of course, so they can't help each other. You know, what's the answer to question number 2? You can, and probably should, with multiple choice questions, significantly limit the exam time, because otherwise they will help each other out. You can supervise them during the exam. Of course, that depends on how many students you have, and it does require many proctors. So the more students you have taking the exam, if you're going to supervise them, you really need a lot of us watching. Yes, you should really and truly be asking open book questions. You should be asking analytic questions. If you can't do any of this, then there is software that locks down the browser so they cannot cheat, as in they cannot look things up on Google on the computer that they're currently using, but they all have one of these. And clearly they can use the phone at the same time, okay? You can use Turnitin if you're checking for plagiarism. And what we have also done, and we think it's really very useful, is we tell the students ahead of time that they may be asked to have an oral exam randomly. And in that case, we will know whether they have, in fact, learned the material or not. Quick point about Bloom's taxonomy. I'm using an example here of anatomical assessment, but the same thing applies to any question you'd like. Bloom's taxonomy. Remembering is the lowest level of knowing, if you like. So the question where I want to test their memory would be, give me the attachment of this or the other structure. Understanding, the second level. Explain to me in anatomical terms why sensation over the palm of the hand is intact if you have a carpal tunnel syndrome. So this requires understanding and explanation. Next level, even higher, applying. Now, what questions can you ask your patient to distinguish between a median nerve injury at the elbow and at the wrist? There is a difference. What questions can you ask your patient to find which of these two they have? Another level, even more difficult, but this is what we really want them to know. In what ways does the claw hand of a median nerve and ulnar nerve injury differ? How do they differ? How do you know that one is different to the other? What are the consequences of a fracture of the neck of the humerus? What could happen? Rather than answering, this nerve passes here, this artery does this, what are the consequences of? And then lastly, the most difficult, I suppose, is what tools could you use to evaluate the severity of a brachial plexus injury? Now, I'm not suggesting that every single topic be addressed in all these methods. I'm simply saying, please, let us not only test memory, because that is not real learning. I think we've already mentioned most of this, and I realize that my time is running out, so I will quickly pass this on. But basically, very quickly, we must have pilot exams. Students need to know what they are likely to come across. Ideally, if you're going to use some software to run the exam, there is some that actually allows cloud backup, so that if the student's exam is interrupted, They don't lose everything. Everything is still there and uploaded to the cloud. At the end, my conclusion, if I may, blended learning, I think, really transforms the role of the teacher. We are no longer the disseminator of knowledge. We are no longer the sage on the stage. We are facilitators of learning. Blended learning allows collaborative learning, and collaborative learning leads to better doctors. These are better communicators, better able to express themselves. The teaching and learning is flexible. It's centered on the student, and it overcomes the restrictions of time and space that we currently have. There is no doubt that we can achieve much more than we can just using textbooks without, frankly, increasing our resources. Clearly, it's convenient. Clearly, it's very flexible. And there are no geographic constraints. You are sitting in Iraq and Iran, and I'm sitting in Malta right now. And I will tell you that in my classroom at the moment in the foundation school, because I run a pre-tertiary program as well, I currently have 37 students in 17 countries, and they are all logging in and learning together. One other thing that I think is really important is, what does the student learn from this? What do they gain, apart from gaining knowledge? And what else do they gain? Well, they gain persistence. Things, if things fail, they have to persist until it works. They learn to be adaptable. They learn to be resilient. And of course, they learn to be tolerant of uncertainty, which is, after all, one of the most important features of medical practice, uncertainty. So lastly, this is my opinion, and you can absolutely disagree with me, and that's perfectly fine. But I think the medical school of the future, not the current medical school, but the medical school of the future is one where, probably in collaboration with each other, we offer a flexible menu of face-to-face and self-study modules. It isn't necessary for me to teach only my students. I can teach your students, and you can do exactly the same. So individual students can select, I will take this module from this university because it actually is a good module. I'll take this module from another university. Frankly, I believe that any other option, including staying where we are right now, will probably be unaffordable in the future. So I'll end there, and with one of my favorite places to swim, and see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much, Professor Isabel. Really, it was very interesting and very nice presentation. Thanks for sharing us with your information. It was so fast. It was so fast, but it is very interesting information, and we will open the Q&A session at the end of the lectures. Okay, attendees, we will open a Q&A session, or you can type your question in the chat, please. Thank you again, Professor Isabel. Now we will go. Now we will go to our next speaker from Iran, Dr. Rita. Dr. Rita, you can
Hello,
share.
everybody. Thank you. Yes, I'm sharing everything. Yeah.
Okay. Dr. Rita Mushtabazada from Iran, from the Department of E-Learning and Medical Education, Virtual School, Tehran University of Medical Sciences. And she has a PhD in e-learning planning. She is a co-founder of Virtual School of Tehran University of Medical Sciences, and a faculty member of e-learning and medical education department, and vice dean for international affairs in this school. And she is a dual affiliated faculty member of medical education department and Virtual University of Medical Sciences. She has been one of the principal investigators of several research projects in the field of e-learning and medical education in Iran. Some are as fellow academic ranking of the medical schools, metric systems of faculties, members, activities, and comprehensive education, our system, comprehensive system of e-continuous education, national institutional accreditation system of e-learning centers, and so on. Now, she, as the core responsible body, is working on the development and establishment of Iran's national massive open online courses, MOOCs, platform, and National Learning Management System, LMS. She has published several articles and books in related fields. Thank you again, Dr. Rita, for joining us. You can start your presentation.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you for inviting me to this event. I should thank Prof. Shaheen, Prof. Iftikhar, and you all colleagues in Basra University. And also I would send my hellos to dear Prof. Isabel. Nice to meet you here again. I really love your lectures. I learn a lot whenever you have a presentation, and also I'm deeply grateful because of in regards of your feedback to our experience in Tehran University of Medical Sciences. Thank you for your introduction. Let me start my presentation. I'm going to start my lecture. Actually a brief one that is about blended learning in clinical education. Okay, let's start the presentation with going through the history of blended learning. You know that whenever we talk about blended learning, mostly we are talking of mixing or combining online learning with face-to-face learning. That was what we thought of blended learning. But when Corona came, and we were happy with this idea, I know that most of professors used in some extent virtual learning in their traditional teaching learning process. And it didn't matter if it is a clinical education or a non-clinical one. The minimum level was using social media as a complementary tool for their teaching learning process classes. But when the Corona came, we were shocked. Because of the closure of the universities, this face-to-face part of teaching learning was gone, and it was suddenly gone as a shock. And now we know that we are not happy with this. And we are trying all over the world to find solutions to overcome this barrier. Let's see what happened. We thought a lot all over the world. The teachers, educators, medical educationists, they all put a lot of effort, and at the end, they reached to a new approach. That is, applying a new definition of blended learning in teaching learning process, and that is a mix of learning online through different learning strategies, that is omitting face-to-face interaction. So it worked, and it is working for many courses in our curricula, especially the ones that don't need psychomotor skills. But what happens about clinical education? Can we omit face-to-face part? Absolutely, your answer is no. We cannot omit the face-to-face part. We need it to some extent. So a question raises, what is the solution? What can we do? Let's take a look at our clinical education activities and must-to-knows. You know that when students, medical students, dental students, they come to school, they need some theoretical knowledge as the background of acquiring skills. There are some activities run in our wards, like morning reports, case presentation, clinical runs, and so on. They need to learn communication skill, history taking, physical examination. They need to perform different clinical procedures. They should be able to provide consultation to our patients. And also, I know that depending on the discipline, there are so many other duties, tasks, and activities that are assigned to our learners. And in this presentation, I'm focusing on this point, that how can we design our course, our education in a clinical ward to, cover all these aspects of our teaching learning process. And that is, you know, like a diagram, because blending, as the word shows, it means that you mix everything to combine everything, and you should combine it in a way that you can reach to an effective clinical education. Long before Corona time, and by long, I mean maybe 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because when it comes to technology enhanced learning, the time is so short, the advancement is so short. Long before this Corona time, you know, face-to-face learning was separated from e-learning strategies, and e-learning strategies was growing up. Around Corona time, in most universities, we had some kind of blending. Not purposefully, maybe, not planned systematically in the school or university, but professors used technology in their education routinely. And what to do for now is to blend it more and to minimize the physical presence and to apply more technology enhanced learning in our teaching process. Now we come to the point that I would like to review 4 main models of blended learning. You know, there are lots of blended learning models in the literature and text when you read, but I have picked these 4 because I think that it will have its own message for all professors to have an idea of how to blend their courses. Let's go through each of them very briefly. By rotation model, we mean that learners rotate between learning modalities, and it could be scheduled. For example, this event is virtual, this event is in person, and you should participate in a timetable in these modalities. But the most of the learning, as literature says, you know, it's just a definition, of course, occurs in a physical campus. And the flipped classroom that Professor Isabel mentioned is one of the most classic examples of this kind of blending. So we can use this model for blending our courses, and we can ignore that learning occurs mostly in physical campus when it comes to COVID-19 time. The other model, flex model, is one. I would like to ask all colleagues, audience, to think of your course and try to imagine how can you deliver your course, you know, under the umbrella of one of these models. You know, it will help us during this webinar. Flex model, in this model, learners switch between learning modalities on a customized fluid schedule. So it is not predetermined. And e-learning is its backbone. You know, there is more emphasis on e-learning part. And, you know, students are somehow self-paced, and they are more self-regulated in this model of blended learning. In the previous model, that was the instructor, the teacher, who planned everything, the modalities, the timetable, the switch between e-learning and face-to-face training. All was planned with by the instructor. The other model is a la carte, or in French, if you send courses in addition to their face-to-face ones. And it is a great option for elective courses during, you know, in a curriculum. In this model, during COVID time, you can select the courses that could be taught totally in e-learning approach, and then deliver it to a student as an additional course to their routine curricula that is blended somehow with face-to-face and e-learning approaches. And the last model that I'm going to talk about, and I love it, is enriched virtual model. This model allows learners to complete majority of course in e-learning approach, but they attend in a school for some parts of the curriculum that needs face-to-face interaction and practice. And in this model, you don't need your student to attend this, in a daily routine in the university. As Prof. Isabel said, we can minimize it to 1 or 2 days a week. So this model can work a lot when you are talking of, COVID time. And another point to add, even you can blend 2 or 3 these models to, design your teaching process in your clinical setting. So when you are talking of blending, you should be able to think more than just blending virtual and face-to-face components. Even when it comes to virtual components, you should be able to combine different strategies of e-learning to reach to the most effectiveness possible within your setting. So let's reach to this question and continue our journey with this question. Which model works the best for clinical education? For determining the best model for your setting, of course, you need to pay attention to several factors. You need to pay attention to your learners' level. Pre-clinic students, pre-clerkship students, clerkship ones or resident ones, they are different. They are all totally different. You should be able to think of different e-learning strategies. You should be able to think of course requirements and learning objectives. And you should consider social distancing as a main factor during COVID-19 time. And the most important question is what your facilities are. During the presentation of the Chancellor of the University, I understood which tools are used usually in Basra University. So teachers should be aware that these are the facilities they have for the e-learning part. For example, they have Google Class, they have social media groups like in Telegram, WhatsApp, and so on. So you should be aware, and you should, you should train your faculty members to be familiar with different facilities and tools and how to apply them, how to use them in their teaching process. And when you consider all these factors, you should redesign your course to reach the objective of minimum attendance in the clinical setting relevant to the level of your learners and the students. Now, this is the diagram that shows that you can combine different aspects, different approaches like in-person teaching, social media, the LMS you use, e-contents, different types of simulations to have an effective clinical education. Let me review briefly some steps on how to blend a clinical course. And I would like to ask you to have your example in your mind. And when I'm talking, just have a brief review on your own context and do these steps in your mind with me. First, please list tasks and must-knows in clinical setting in your ward. You can say that, for example, I'm working in the internal medicine ward, and we have some activities like morning report, case presentation, problem solving, book reviews, I don't know, everything. And my learners, my students should be able to learn specific tasks through participating in these activities. Now that you have the list of your activities and must-knows, you can categorize them into 3 main groups. The ones that should be trained in person. For example, clinical examination. Some aspects of communication skill in face-to-face setting. There are some groups of activities that are better to be trained in person, but we can do something for them to be trained virtually. And when we have the crisis of COVID-19, maybe it is more cost effective to do it mostly virtually. So we can categorize them in the under the umbrella of better to be trained in person. And there are also so many must-to-knows and activities that could be trained via e-learning strategies. I would like to emphasize on why I have put the second group, because as far as all of us, I'm sure we agree, after the COVID-19 goes out, inshallah, okay, we will not come back to the status of pre-corona time. So we are forced to change our instructional design for delivering our curriculum. So for the second group, when the COVID finishes, we can make them again in face-to-face delivery. But we can keep the ones that could be totally trained via e-learning strategies. As Prof. Isabel said, the ones that they don't need to listen to our lectures, they can read them, they can practice them themselves. So the second group is somehow in the middle range. You can decide on them whether you can deliver them virtually or in person. The third step, you can determine your tools and facilities, and the university administrative should be able to provide a list of facilities and tools for their faculty member, and they should teach them how to use them. These tools could be either the ones that are for university, for example, a special LMS that is announced by the university that could be used for teaching. This could be the facilities for e-content development, for example, and the ones that are open source and free in the internet that could be used by faculty members. For example, the ones that are used for e-portfolio, they are free good tools that are provided in internet for e-portfolios, for assessment, and so on. But the faculty members should be familiar with these tools and have a list of them that they are capable to be used in teaching learning process. And then it comes to the point that you can select the type of blending you want to use and apply in your course. Maybe in a ward, in a clinical setting, you can flip some parts of activities. You can use e-contents as another part. You can, for example, enrich your curriculum, enrich your setting with some augmented or virtual reality aspects, you know. So there are different types of blending. And by this blending, I don't mean only blending face-to-face with e-learning approach. When it comes to e-learning, you can blend different e-learning strategies together as well. So in this way, you design your course, and it is an active process. I suppose that last semester, most of us had the approach of try and error because we were shocked. But for now, we should plan for our course, how to blend it. And then we should ask students' opinion on the program. They are good resource. They have the experience of one semester of anxiety. You know, they were anxious last semester, different experiences. Some of them love some aspects of the course that was delivered. Some of them have some critiques to what they have, last semester. You should ask their opinion on the program that you have designed. And of course, this is an important point. You should think of students and program evaluations systematically, not by try and error and just waiting for, challenges to come and then solving them. You should anticipate everything for your teaching, learning, clinical setting. And the main objective now is to minimize physical presence for each level of students in clinical setting. As a conclusion, I would like to give you a sample scenario. It's just a sample, it's not, I've not worked on it with a group for example, in a department to reach a net scenario, but it can provide you with an idea of how to blend your clinical education. The sample scenario is that, imagine that your target group is pre-clerkship medical students, and their number in each rotation is about 10 students. And the ward, the clinical ward, is internal medicine. We perform instructional design and reach to the combination of enriched visual and flipped model of delivery. In this approach, as you can see in the slide, you can divide your course into two parts, virtual part and in-person part. For virtual part, you can decide as you see. For example, you can provide the facility of participating in activities like morning reports online. You are running morning reports and clinical runs with your residents in your actual ward. You can provide the facility of launching online to these events for the students that are at their home. You know, this is some kind of mixed or blended delivery, for example, of an event like morning report. Okay, you can provide the facility of case discussions in different social media or forum discussion boards within, for example, an LMS. I would like to emphasize on peer learning. You can define activities that students perform together. As it was said, they can teach each other. They can collaborate to do a project, to solve a problem, to solve a difficult case, and so on. You can provide a wide range of multimedia e-content for the theoretical aspects of your curriculum. And you can provide them collaborative teamwork, even with very simple tools like Google Docs or Google Sheets. Collaborative teamwork, they work a lot when you provide them for your students. And of course, you can think of some simulations like virtual patients. And when you come to simulations, you know, I know that in countries like Iraq and Iran, sometimes we are in lack of budgets for developing high-tech simulations. But sometimes these simulations are not so complicated, and they can be easily designed. And they need, you know, intelligent and clever professors to work on it, rather than having a special huge amount of budget. For example, to provide a platform that includes different virtual patients on must-knows and better-to-knows of the curriculum. And then it leaves for you only some special aspects of the curriculum that should be delivered in person. So you can minimize the presence of your pre-clerkship students to, for example, 2 days or 1 day a week planned for, you know, practicing those parts that could not be covered virtually. This is just a sample of the output of a comprehensive instructional design that could be applied in a clinical setting. Sometimes in Tehran University, we deliver workshops that during, for example, a 4 or 3 hour virtual workshop, online workshop, we train our faculty members, clinical faculty members, to design their clinical education in a way that they come to a product that it is feasible. It is the mostly, or let's say somehow, the best solution possible regarding the facilities, budget, human resource, and so on. And at the end of that workshop, they have a solution for their ward that they can work further on it to make it as a complete educational program. So it would work in your university as well if you have some capacity building programs for your faculty members, that during a workshop they work on a plan to have a draft as a suggestion to their department to be delivered to the student in their own clinical setting. Thank you very much for your attention, and of course I'm ready for question and answer at the end of the event. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rita, for this nice presentation. Thank you for valuable information. Now we will go to our next speaker, Dr. Mohammadi.
Hello.
Dr. Mohammadi has PhD in medical education, and he is one of the sorry, I have to mute the mic. Now it's okay. Our speaker from Iran, Dr. Mohammadi, he has a PhD in medical education, and he is one of the founders of Virtual School of Tehran University of Medical Sciences, and currently a faculty member of e-learning and medical education department in this school. And he is a vice chancellor for infrastructure of Virtual University of Medical Sciences, a new established university. He has performed several developmental and research projects in the field of e-learning and medical education in Iran, some of which are academic ranking of medical schools, stratification of educational services, metric systems for faculties, members' activities, and comprehensive educational award system, and comprehensive system of continuous medical education, national institutional accreditation system of e-learning centers, and so on. Now he as the manager is working on development of Iran's National Massive Open Online Courses MOOCs platform and National Learning Management System LMS, and he has published several articles and books in related fields. Thank you, Dr. Mohammadi, for joining us today. You can start your presentation.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Hello, everybody. First of all, let me thank my dear colleagues at University of Basra and other universities all over the Iraq. And thank you all for attending this workshop today, and thanking you for inviting me to deliver my lecture in this valuable workshop. I enjoyed the presentations of dear Professor Isabel and Professor Qutaiba, and I would like to thank them too. As you have seen in the workshop agenda, the topic I want to present in this section is e-learning in medical sciences education, definition and brief review. In this presentation, we are going to review briefly e-learning definition, types, and some of its important aspects. It's worth mentioning that most of the topics and approximately all of the topics of my lecture have discussed in previous sections, and I only am going to review these topics. And as you know, it's extremely important to have the same concepts on e-learning terminology. Firstly, let's have a short review on the history of distance learning. It may be interesting to know that the distance education emerged in concurrence with the development of railway system in 19th in large widespread country, Australia. The first instances were posting print packages by train to different remote areas of those countries. Afterward, newer technologies, namely radio, television, and then the internet were used in this regard. Meanwhile, there happened to establish dual mode universities covering both distance and face-to-face education. To clarify more, in high population countries of the developing world, DLN has offered very significant opportunities for education. Meanwhile, they still have to handle infrastructure and professional competency issues to improve the DLN. On the other hand, industrialized countries have utilized DLN to cover the needs of lifelong learning, mass education, and training of new skills, as these needs are the ones that could not be easily met by conventional institutions. After this brief history, it is worth mentioning that one encounters a variety of terminologies related to different models of non-face-to-face studying. Obviously, we should be used in their proper meaning. As an example, distance learning emphasizes on physical separation of instructors and learners, regardless of the substituted media used for their communication. Considering this concept, e-learning is a type of distance learning in which communication occurs through the media of the internet. Hence, the definition of e-learning has changed within recent years because of development of related technologies and emerging new instructional methods. Anyhow, in the last versions, e-learning is defined as the use of the internet for enhancing teaching learning process. In other words, the e-learning refers application of internet technologies to deliver any solution that enhances learners' knowledge and performance. In spite of the fact that this definition is widely used, it does not include some approaches such as augmented reality, virtual reality, or some kinds of simulations. Hence, one should consider this point while using this interpretation. At this point of presentation, we are going to review a sample of statistics which show the rapid growth in e-learning deployment all over the world. Figures show that approximately 80% of companies in North America apply online learning, among which 50% deliver at least one training sessions via e-learning in each year. To add more details, about 80% of employers have participated in e-learning courses. Hereby, one may ask if the internet limitation in like Middle East and Asia would play a barrier role for e-learning implementation compared to regions such as North America. To answer this question, let's look at the internet penetration rate at the most important infrastructure for implementing e-learning. Considering the internet penetration rate of 95% in North America compared to more than 60% in Middle East, one assumes that e-learning dissemination in Middle East region is absolutely feasible and internet access is not considered as a barrier. Actually, okay. After reviewing these statistics, let's take a look at e-learning types, namely asynchronous and synchronous e-learning. All right. Actually, in synchronous e-learning, instructors and learners communicate at the same time, so that time limitation remains. Webinar sessions, virtual classes, real-time conferences are good examples of this type. And as Professor Isabel told, software such as Adobe Connect, Zoom, Skype, and some of the famous platforms used for running these events. On the other hand, the asynchronous e-learning time limitation doesn't exist, and instructors and learners doesn't need to communicate at the same time. As an example, imagine that an instructor provides learners with content and related assignments through some web-based platform. Then learners study the content and the platform and perform their task in their own pace and time. In the whole of this presentation, I discuss in asynchronous e-learning and especially using LMS for interaction. In a recent published journal in JAMA, they told that the experiences in COVID-19 crisis showed that asynchronous e-learning is more suitable in all over the world, both in developing and undeveloped countries. Okay, at this point, we're going to highlight some points of strengths and weaknesses of e-learning. Let's start with strengths points, among which some of the most important ones are as follows. Students have access to the content in any time and any place. That's it's the most famous advantages of e-learning. Contents could be enriched by multimedia to promote deep learning, especially in teaching clinical aspects and procedures. Searching and navigation facilities provide an unlimited access to resources. Learners can use material and resources discontinuously. The possibility of being interactive, that is known as the heart of an e-learning context. Indeed, there are several effective types of interactions in e-learning, including teacher-learner interaction via tools like assignments and messaging systems, learner-learner interactions via tools like discussion groups and forums, and learner content interactions. Sharing the experience and knowledge with others at a distance is one of the other advantages of e-learning. And finally, organized data gathering from students' activities. As a matter of fact, one can name more advantages for e-learning that are not listed here. After reviewing e-learning definition, types, cons, and pros, from this point forward, some pedagogical, excuse me. Okay, before that, I'm going to mention some weaknesses of e-learning. Usually we medical educationists don't like to mention about weaknesses of e-learning, and I missed them. Lack of personal contact. Limitations for demonstrating of clinical procedures and actual practice with missions that is discussed in previous section completely. Difficulties in adopting both teacher and a student to new ways of communicating and using new technologies. Having to cope with technological problems during the course, like internet interruption or shortage of bandwidth, difficulties in measuring online students' learning outcomes and the attendance. That Professor Isabel told about this very completely, and other weaknesses, so on. To some of virtual learning advantages and disadvantages, please take a look at this slide, which demonstrates some differences between e-learning and traditional face-to-face setting, and see if you agree all of them. In e-learning, we can save money in development, travel, and time. E-learning is great for specific, concise topics. In e-learning, students can take anywhere, anytime, and e-learning takes about 50% less time than classroom instructions. It's better for remote traveling or high turnover populations, and in e-learning, students can pause, reread, or test out of contents. And in opposite, in traditional learning, it's better there is better use of time for highly complex information. It's great for collaborative topics. In traditional learning, students can ask questions or role play situations real time. They can help in traditional learning. We can help students feel more valued. Students learn from each other, and highly skilled trainers can adopt information for students. After reviewing e-learning definition types and cons and pros, from this point forward, some pedagogical aspects are discussed. Firstly, we start with main components of an e-learning system that are undoubtedly focused on promoting teacher-students interaction. The first and the most important component is content development and delivery that is considered as the key factor for system success. In fact, the way one designs the course directly affects learning outcomes. The second one is IT infrastructure, by which one means issues like bandwidth, hardware, and software. And the last one, which is availability of suitable approved rules and regulations that are necessary for learning dissemination in any university. Hereby, we reach to the point of discussing two pedagogical approaches in instructional design of an online course. Considering the type of interaction and the task, there are two main e-learning design types, namely instructor-led versus student-led e-learning design. On one side, in a student-led class, students are in charge of their learning, and they are the ones who decide when to study, what to study more, and in which sequence tasks are performed. On the opposite side, a teacher-led classroom is designed basically regarding teachers' decisions. In this context, while students seem quiet and controlled, the teachers take responsibility for what students need. In other words, in this model, not only instructional approaches are structured, sequenced, and led by teachers, but also these are teachers who present academic content to students, such as what happens in a lecture or demonstration. To make it more tangible, in student-led classes, teachers play the role of tutor or mentor, and that is guiding on the side, as Professor Isabel told in his lecture. In contrast to teacher-led classes, where teachers' role in direct teaching, labeled as sage on the stage. Here, we come to define a routinely used terminology that is blended learning and has discussed completely in previous sections. It is not too long ago that some educationists believed in total substitution of face-to-face courses with online ones. But time showed that it was not the case, especially in medical sciences, and the second wave of e-learning emerged widely in the world that is known as blended learning. Indeed, current pedagogical evidence declared that in many instances, e-learning alone would not be sufficient, and holding a face-to-face classes is a necessity. Actually, blended learning is a style of education in which students learn via electronic and online media, as well as traditional face-to-face teaching. This figure shows the relationship between these types of learning, which has discussed in other sections. To provide more details on blended learning, looking at some statistics would be helpful. A study performed 70% of teachers used blended learning, who declared two main reasons for doing so. One is increasing students' engagement and improving academic achievements. And second is saving their time and energy. All right. At this point, we change the topic to another one, as I have used the term contents repeatedly in my presentation. In this last part of my talk, we go through its meaning and types. Generally speaking, e-learning is digital text and images designed for being displayed on the web pages. As I mentioned before, e-content development is the heart of teaching learning process. Content development requires expert knowledge in the subject area, patience in creating the necessary objects that make up quality, and a high sense of creativity in structuring and sequencing the topics to make a complete whole. This slide shows a continuum including different types of e-learning, e-content, that begin with ebooks and the handouts, followed by PowerPoint, podcasts, different kinds of podcasts, enhanced podcasts with animation, video podcasts, and audio podcasts, voice synchronized with slides, simulations and animations, and finally, collaborative learning contents. This variety shows the importance of getting familiar with their characteristics in order to use them properly. To wrap up the presentation hereby, I reviewed main e-learning concepts and some important terminology briefly. However, there remains a last point worth mentioning. As a new progressive domain, one should remain up to date when it comes to field related to cyberspace, and e-learning is not an except in this regard. Okay, at the end of my presentation, I would like to emphasize on some facts and misconceptions based on e-learning principles. Most of these facts and misconceptions have derived from our experiences during COVID-19 crisis. And knowing these facts and misconceptions would help teachers to deliver an effective e-learning. Okay. What do you think? I only need Zoom. I only need Zoom or some tools like that to run my classes. What do you think? Everybody who agrees with this statement, send the number 22 in the chat room box, and other persons who disagrees, please send 33. Okay. Thank you. Okay, as you know, e-learning is not equal to synchronous online learning. In many cases, asynchronous e-learning, for example, through an LMS, works the best. The other statement and misconception is one should develop multimedia or video content to be able to deliver an e-courses. What do you think? Okay. As you know, e-learning is not equal to e-content, such as multimedia, videos, or other types of e-content. Think of course objectives, and learners need to choose the best content. And maybe some e-contents such as reference books or published articles are more suitable for postgraduate students. Okay, and another one. I don't like the university's LMS. I can't teach well in this platform. What do you think? Don't forget that you govern the software, and IT facilities are only a tool beside the teachers. Make the best out of the accessible technologies. I need to upload files with larger sizes and variety of formats. I need to run synchronous classes and so on. What do you think about this statement? Okay, don't forget that you are the provider and students are the users. What is their idea? Please don't forget students' bandwidth and the cost of internet for them. Are they happy with your decisions? And I don't have enough experience. What are the 3 key factors for a good e-teaching? In my suggestions, these 3 key factors are most important. Don't overload students with information and tasks. Deliver an interactive course and make the best out of blending. And finally, blended learning is combining e-learning and face-to-face classes. And what do you think? As it discussed in previous sections, blend different contexts and strategies, face-to-face, LMS-based, MOOCs, Zoom, virtual and augmented reality, social networks, and face-to-face sessions for especially clinical students. Thank you very much. And these are some references I used for preparing this lecture. Thank you for attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mohammadi, for this nice presentation and valuable information. Thanks for polling. And really, we have poll in Zoom, but I don't have idea about your lecture. Then we can put the poll in the Zoom and do it for the participants. Thank you again. Now we reach to our last lecture today, presented by Dr. Murtada Al-Musafir, the Vice Dean of College of Medicine of Basra University. You can start your presentation, Dr. Murtada. And then Dr. Jawad Al-Khurasani. Thank you, Dr. Murtada.
Thank you very much, Dr. Qutaiba. Thank you very much. I would like to thank all our guest speakers for accepting our invitation to participate in this meeting. And also I would like to thank all the participants and those who organized this meeting, and thank you for moderator. This slide and this subsequent slide, I will discuss in summary what we did in University of Basra College of Medicine for the last year, and what we did, where we are, and what we are looking for. So there is a sentence or paragraph, small paragraph by Albert Einstein, who says, "I never teach my students. I only attempt to provide the conditions in which they can learn. So this is very important. You should make the environment suitable for learning for the students. Really, it was a challenging year for the students and for the teaching staff because it carries a lot, and you know the situation of pandemic, and we shift the process from bizarre into a more organized one. And this carried out by coordination between the university, represented by the chancellor and the university staff, deans, teaching staff, and all of these in assistance of the IT make things possible. And we have also had an old experience in summative and formative examinations during the last years. We organized the students into classes using Google Classroom, Telegram channels, Google Meet, Zooms, FCC, etc. Supply students with official emails in order to be enrolled officially in the classes, with the creation of video lectures, which include the theoretical part in addition to simulation and a video simulation. We use both synchronous and asynchronous learning, and to start with, the students were reluctant to this style of learning. But as we know, after a huge work, we make the students more, they love the e-learning more. The concentration was on clinical scenarios, because you know that a medical student need to manage a patient. Clinical examination in a skill lab, videos, as I said, discussing clinical cases on Telegram, Zoom sessions, and so on. Also, we have a rule in telemedicine through the Consultation Medical Center of University of Basra, and we start managing patients by using telemedicine. Also, we developed our teaching platform, and it's called e-learning, and this is very important, a platform, and it was used in the educational process. Online examination, it was a good experience and choice during COVID-19 pandemic, with some limitations due to some internet problems, minimal technical problems, the problem of student evaluation. But as Dr. Isabel said, we use a lot of support of students directly, like loan of devices with iPad and phones. Also, we didn't forget e-conferences and workshops in order to develop our experience, student training. Also, we have a lot of things in cooperation with the Basra Health Directorate. Also, we developed our web at the University of Basra, and it contains a lot of open educational resources for the students. And now the concept of learning, a blended learning, is evolved, and we are starting to gain more development of our infrastructures with the creation of smart hall for doing the video lectures and video clinical examinations. The blended learning is joining the best features of any class teaching with the best features of online learning to promote active, independent learning. And thank you very much.
قتيبة.
العفو دكتور مرتضى.
Dr. Qutaiba, I am finished.
Thank you, Dr. Murtada, for presentation.
Thank you very much.
What about Dr. Jawad Al-Khurasani?
Yes. Next to me is Dr. Jawad to complete our experience in Al-Zahra College of Medicine. Yes.
Thank you.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور قتيبة.
Thank you.
Just allow me to share the screen.
Okay, just a minute.
Yeah. Is this okay?
Yes, it's okay.
Okay.
Full screen, Dr. Jawad. Full screen.
Yeah.
Full screen, please.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Qutaiba. Thank you for the Chancellor of Basra University. And thank you for our special guests, Professor Rita, Professor Isabel, and Professor Mohammadi. Dear audience, good afternoon, and I hope you become safe and sound. On behalf of Al-Zahra College of Medicine and the Scientific and Curriculum Committee, I will present the experience in our college during the COVID era. The objectives is to start with who we are and how we deliver the e-learning in our college, and the way of assessment that we use, the positive things that we inquired, and any points need to be improved. Al-Zahra College of Medicine started since the academic year 17-18, so it's just on a 3 years college. It is born from the mother college of the Basra Medical College, and it's adapted in a 6-year integrated outcome-based curriculum. The college from the beginning is used on e-learning using the model and the other facilities, the Telegram and the group discussion with the students. So our teaching staff and students already, they have their experience in e-learnings from the beginning. In the era we are using a classroom, we arrange our modules into a classroom, different classrooms, and we invite the students with their university email, and we have the classroom suites. So it gives us a lot of facilities during electronic teaching. And in these classrooms, and again into the Moodle, we upload the working books, the references, the lectures in different ways, and special tasks, special self-learning, self-directed learning topics. And all these things are sent for the student from a time from the real attendance, and so they are preparing themselves before they are attending the working sessions. And really, this is the preparation day, which is before the era, which is converted into an online preparation day, that all the lectures not performed by single teachers. We have a module staff preparing the lecture, discussing the things, and then uploading the lectures using module staff, all the module staff sharing in the lecture. And again, we put the lectures in the classroom or in the Moodle in different modalities, helping the student to copy these things or listening to the lecturer, and then with some instruction that can be given by the module leaders about the things, specific things or specific tasks needed to be prepared before the day of the session. We use synchronous and non-synchronous teaching. We use the timetable for pre-COVID era. Each module have on a day, and we complete the day for each module. We use the lecture time for discussion. As we send the lecture using the sound and videos for the student, so we didn't like to re-deliver it again. We open the lecture and we discuss with the students anything vague or any questions or some tasks that we give to the student in the lectures that we deliver on the classroom. We use some questions through the lectures as self-directed learning. The attendance for this work is by many or a couple of teaching staffs, each one of them having a specific task to work. Some of them as collecting the questions, answering the students on the chat, evaluating the activities, and at the end, all the records links will send to the students. He can recall these activity. This is an example of how we record using an attendance, Google Attendance Meet. And this is the at the end of the session, some teachers record the presence of the student, or it's just online, or some activity that they have, and the questions and answer. And this is the video record sent, the link sent for the student at the end. And we have an asynchronous learning. It's mainly done by the student themselves. They answer the questions or the questions between them on a Telegram group supervised by the teachers. And we can follow them to correct any bizarre or any mistakes or any information need to be corrected, but really they are directing themselves for deep learning in their time at night or afternoon. In this example, they share between them the videos and the questions and answer, and they are very, very nice topics they discussing, and sometimes we need to enter and help them, and most of the time we didn't enter. The assessment, we use different modalities of assessment. We are assessing the attendance of the student between two practice, those who are enrolled in the session and they are not active, so it is just attend. We send for them a message in the chat or ask their names to participate actively in the session. We use the quizzes, and we have a lot of points against the quizzes. We use it last year, but it has a lot of problems that, in addition to the cheating, they make the students avoiding presence in the lectures before the quiz. So we need to think this year, we adopt the quizzes or not. We use mainly the reports for self-directed learning and weekly reflections. And I think we need to concentrate on the reports and the weekly reflection better than using the quizzes. We schedule the quizzes in order not to load the student about the quizzes. We spare every week not more than 2 quizzes in a timetable. It is announced for the student and for the lecturers and teaching staff, in order not to make the student busy all the time by doing the quizzes. And every week we have, or every 6 sessions, we have a summation of the student activity by the module leaders about their attendance, their activity, their quizzes, their reflections, and this is reported for every student. We have a self-directed learning subjects. We give it a very good experience for the student to use the electronic tools in order to deeply learn the subjects. And we found that they have, during the reflection or after reading the reflection of them, we found that these reports help them to deeply understand a specific subject. And again, we use a multiple formative assessment for them. We send them problem solving, and we have another way of making deeply learned. We send them on some exercise about how to write good questions. And really, they write in a very nice questions, and the curriculum committee and the assessment committee use some of these questions from the students. Not less than 10 to 15% of the questions in the exam paper is from the student themselves. And then we use the personal and professional development program in order to all the students are shared with a specific tutor or mentor, and we have weekly reflections about their activities, and they report their learning experience. For example, they report how do their learning experience and how they focus on where is this strength in their learning experience, where is the weakness, and how they put a learning, how they put an action plan for their weaknesses. And this is an example of the students' portfolios that it is sent for us to know everything about their work. And they are writing it in very good way. And again, there is a questionnaire sent for the students about personal development plan and academic development. And we conclude from these things what is the things that in their mind to share them in improving the way of learning and teaching in our college. And again, we sense for reflection or rewards from the doctors, from the friends, from certain students to know what happens for them. Again, we use reports, self-reflection reports at the end of the semester. They discuss everything happens during the semester and point that they face, and we learn a lot from these activities. What is the problems that happens in the students, and share them in making us taking a good decision for the next semester. In the end assessment or end of the semester assessment, we use short answer questions. We don't use the true false because of guess and cheating. Still, I think we are the only college using the short answer questions in their end semester assessment, plus the best answer questions. OSCE is stopped, and we need to think in the blended teaching to resume OSCE for the further examination. Already we use Bloom, and I agree with Professor Isabel. We use the high taxonomy Bloom's type of questions in order to reduce the cheating. And again, we need to cover all these subjects, and we have, this is modification of each module. We divide into each session and which question is given in summative or in the quiz or in the formative assessment. And then we need to cover all the subjects in order to reduce the selection of student to read, which session is read more or the session is not read. So we divide the sessions, and we divide the questions from each session, and even to cover each learning objective. So we have this map to cover almost all. The red one is not given. So in the next, or in the reset, or in the other examination, we need to cover the questions that it is in the red color. And again, we divide it into which one is better to be asked in short answer, which one is better to be asked in a best answer question. And then we have a post-assessment, post-examination assessment, that each piece of the questions, we need to know what is the marks that it takes. And we have questions about, say, this question explain the EC changes to be prominent in some of the 12 leads. We need to find why the student having a 45% right answer. And again, we know that this question is for the session 6, this question for the session 1, learning objective 2, this is for the session 5, this is for session 9, 8, 7. And again, we know where is the weakness, in which session we have a low percentage of answering. And again, we need to know why this question, because it's 100% answered, because it's direct, just list, remembering, list 4 organs in the body having sinusoid, and it's for the first year assessment paper. We found we expect that these students will answer 100% because it's a straightforward question. We have a lot of surveys, post-assessment surveys, and we have reward results from that about their opinion about the difficulty. This is an example of one question that is the overall difficulty of the questions, or overall relevance of the questions to what you read, or the your experience that you expect your colleague, how the percentage of your colleagues will be succeed in that examination, all these surveys performed after each assessment. And the points that need to be evaluated more is the ways how to make the student more engaged, not just attend, how they make them actively participate in the e-learning. Then we have another problem, which is overestimation of the student marks. Really, we compared the student marks between this year and the previous year. We found that there is some picture of raise the possibility of overestimation. So they don't take real mark. And this is not because we didn't like to give the marks, but probably it gives a false impression for the student to think that they are good or they are well. We need to talk to them that this is an overestimation and you need to learn or dock on certain topics, especially after the post-assessment, post-examination assessment. We found which student that he has some weakness in certain modules. We need to, through the mentor, personal tutor, we need to send them a message that you have said in the tissue of the body you have low marks. You need to concentrate on these topics. Still, we play a lot of things about reducing the cheating in the examination, but really this is a points that that cannot be eliminated. What we did in our college is using talk with the patient, with the student, in order to make them self-aware about themselves. And I think this is the only method in electronic teaching, is to talk with the student, do the personal reflection with them through the personal tutor, through multiple meetings that we did, in order to make them self-aware about themselves, rather than just we make them score seekers. We need to talk with them and improve their feeling that they are aware about themselves, aware about their responsibility, their future work. And these things, I think it's act very well in reducing the cheating by asking the student to depend on themselves. We need to have some change in the evaluation process. I greatly appreciate the talk of evaluation by Professor Isabel. We need to use a high level taxonomy, Bloom taxonomy questions, open questions, thinking questions, in order to know the thought process rather than remembering of the material. And I am happy to learn or to listen about a lot of things that presented by Professor Rita and Professor Mohammadi about the blended learning, and we try to select the best way for our student. And in the next week, we have a trial with our student to use a way of attending a minimum student number to the college, and we will put in some virtual world in the college, and we start to have a role play between the students. Just we need to know how it works in our college. So thank you very much for your listening, and thank you for making me a part of this very nice activity. Thank you, Dr. Qutaiba.
Thank you very much, Dr. Jawad, for this presentation. Thank you for sharing your experience in e-learning at Al Zahra Medical College, University of Basra. It was great. Now, attendees, dear attendees, we reach to this was the last lecture in our webinar. Now we open the Q&A session. Anyone have a question, just raise hand or type your question in the chat, please. If you have any questions, please just raise your hand. Dr. Hussein Abdel Sada, you can unmute your mic, please.
السلام عليكم.
عليكم السلام ورحمة الله. تفضل دكتور. Just unmute your mic, Doctor, please.
we just face a difficult status now. We're thinking how we can help our student to get an information. Thank you for all, for Dr. Saad, Isabel, Rita, and Dr. Mohammadi, and Dr. Murtaza, and Dr. Jawad. For Dr. Isabel, she really shared us a valuable information. It is really like a roadmap now for e-learning. We nicely share, she nicely shared a pyramid figure. You know the pyramid in the first slides. A pyramid figure showed that the teaching by others is qualified about 90% for excellence learning. This is very important pyramid. I think we need to share that with other members. The learning from each other called a pair-pair interaction. Pair-pair interaction between students is very important. We need to concentrate on that. You know, I don't know whether Dr. Jawad said or not, in Al-Zahra Medical College, we have this experience now. Our students in the holiday now, they make a class and they learn each other by this, and this is very important. But the question is, do you think, Dr. Isabel, do you think we can leave the students making pair-pair interaction and learn each other without supervision? Or we need to guide them?
Yeah, that is a really, really good question. I have experienced both ways. We have used peer to peer. There's two things actually. There's peer learning, teaching and learning, and then there is near peer. So peer would be same class, right? So a second year student with a second year student, or a fourth year with a fourth year, same class. And then there is near peer, which may have some advantages. Imagine a year 4 student helping or overseeing a younger cohort, 1 year below them. So I've been through all of this myself. I know what this I found easy, this I found difficult. Let me help you through this. So in any case, I've tried it both ways. What I think is really important is some training and supervision in the initial phases by the tutors. So what I have done in my university is trained trained year 4 students to oversee and teach year 3 ones. I've also done it between 2 and 1, but that was less effective, I have to admit, because they're still very, very young. So the short answer is yes, provided you train them. And what I trained them on really and truly was history taking, okay? History taking skills, because it's very common for students in our medical school to feel rather uncomfortable to go up to a patient in the hospital and take a history without just walk up to someone and say, no, that history taking is a crucial part of learning, right? Of clinical medicine. It's very, very important. So we basically supervised year 4 students and trained them into the position of the patient. So we gave them cases, which again, I'm more than happy to share with any one of you, because I really do believe in the internationality of learning here. We gave them mock cases. We told them to practice answering the questions. So the student would say, excuse me, my name is so-and-so. I came here to ask you some questions. When did the pain start, for example? And the 4th year student is now trained to say, the pain started last week, but it's got worse, blah, 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 blah. A bit like simulated patients, but instead of having a patient do this, have a medical student do it. And the short answer is it works. And I really would encourage all of you to incorporate this in the, if you like, in the hidden curriculum, the curriculum which is not visible to all students.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Isabel. Nice view behind you. Nice view. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Abdul Hussein.
Dr. Qutaiba, may I have a comment to complete the answer of Dr. Hussein?
Yes, please, Dr. Jawad, تفضل.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Qutaiba. Really, this is the first time that our student, the senior students, are helping the junior students start from the 10th of October. And really, it is supervised by me on, they select very good time. And I really now sharing these videos on the website of the university. What is nice is these videos are shared by the other college, and they ask me that some of the university students, other university students, they try to enter this workshop or trial of teaching peer-to-peer or near peer-to-peer students. And then now some students from the Al-Kufa University and I think other university, they try to enter this workshop that's supervised by our college and done by the senior colleagues for their junior colleagues. And I think a couple of them are attending this meeting. A couple of these students are attending this meeting from the College of Medicine. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jawad. Very good. It is a good experience. Attendees, please, if you have any questions, just raise your hand before we finish our webinar today. If anyone, guest speakers, attendees, if anyone have a comment or any interaction, you can just raise your hand. Dr. Hussein.
Hello,
again.
Dr. Qutaiba.
Dr. Muqdad, تفضل.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Muqdad Al-Hajjaj. I'm the Dean Assistant for the College of Pharmacy, University of Basra. So I'd like to thank all the speakers for this wonderful scientific event. Many thanks for the organizers as well. I just want to have two important comments. The first one is regarding the expectations of the students and the lecturers in the blended learning. So as you know, the learning process is an interaction process between the students and the lecturers. Do you think we need to ask the students or to get the expectations from the students about how to achieve the objectives of the learning process in advance, to achieve the maximum outcomes from the learning process? So that's my point, because the process of learning is all about the expectations. So if we match the expectations of the students with the expectations of the lecturers and the outcomes of the curriculum, we probably will get more outcomes from the learning process. So that's the first point. The second point is related to the post-graduation outcomes. So we are now changing the teaching process. So this probably will have influences on the post-graduation practices for the physicians, dentists, and the pharmacists, and all other medical professionals. So do we need to consider what will be the changes, or do we need to plan how the practices are changing after the graduation for the students? So that's another thing. So probably we will think about some changes in the post-graduation practices after the graduation process. So if you have any ideas about these two comments, please don't hesitate to speak about these. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Muqdad. Guest speakers, if you have any answer to the question of Dr. Muqdad, you can answer. And one of you. And attendees, please, if you have any further questions, you can type it in the chat or raise hand.
Pardon.
Yes, Dr. Rita.
Yes, Thank you very much for the questions. Both of them was very really the important ones. You know, for a student engagement during the design of courses, it's a fact in medical education. And when it comes to the time that we are all shocked and we are going to have new experiences, it is more critical to ask about their opinion, their facilities. I'll give you an example here in Iran. We have a national LMS here. And when it comes to faculty members, they complain that they need more, file size permitted to be uploaded in the LMS, both for clinical faculty members and basic sciences, both of them. They all complain that we need to upload larger files, right? But when it comes to the students who are at their own home and they should pay for internet, or they are in remote areas that maybe they have some difficulties regarding the access to internet, they complain on the other side, and they ask professors to chunk their presentations and videos. So I suppose that asking the students and involving them is a critical issue in every aspect, and even for peer learning in routine face-to-face clinical setting. We have, I know that most universities have some kind of mentorship programs that students support each other, especially the newcomers to the university. I suppose that these mentorship programs should be changed to somehow e-mentorship programs so that they help each other in teaching and learning and overcoming challenges. And for the next question about graduates, yes, I suppose that continuous professional development, rules, regulations, strategies, delivery methods should all be somehow affected by this situation, and we should rethink of them. For example, in Iran, they were so quick to develop a document that guides universities and CPD, continuous professional development providers, to new approaches of strategies to train graduates of biomedical sciences. And in this regard, I suppose that it is really, critical to think for post-corona time, and for the students that have experienced a part of their education during corona time. We have students that, for example, they are in the last 1 or 2 years of their education, and they are graduating in corona time. Maybe for these students after COVID-19, we should think special strategies to be sure that they have reached the minimum requirements, especially for the semester that we lost. And I'm talking of the previous semester that maybe in some aspects it was somehow lost, and it was not a systematic approach or design to for delivering the courses or requirements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Rita, for this explanation, for your answer. Thank you very much. Now, I think we reached to the end of our webinar today. That's all.
Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry, Dr. Qutaiba. The Chancellor of Basra University wants to add some comment.
Okay, تفضل Dr. Saad.
Thank you very much, Dr. Qutaiba. Thank you very much, Dr. Murtada. I want to ask our guest from Iran and Dr. Isabel, if you have any rules now to guide, or it is the same rules which you use for the face-to-face teaching to have something about the absentees of the students, or cheating, or dismissing from the classes. Any rules you have for e-learning, or it is the same which is used for face-to-face learning, please?
The one thing I would like to answer in that respect is that when we have students online, so when they are actually interacting with us remotely, we are insisting that they turn on their cameras and participate in the class. Participation is very important. It's as you know, learning is not passive, it has to be active. So them sitting back behind the camera with the camera switched off, not interacting as we are doing now, is frankly not very useful. So that is one feature that we've insisted on, and it seems to be working. Obviously, we don't need the camera on the whole time, but if it's in a small group session, we have 20, 25 students, I need to be able to see them, just as they need to be able to see me. Apart from anything else, as you can imagine, it's very difficult to speak to a blank screen. You know, those of us who are used to teaching, we have real people behind that in front of us, and we are used to seeing their expressions. We're used to seeing them interact with us. Talking to a blank screen is terrible, as you know. So other than that, no, we haven't changed any rules, of course, apart from the cheating rules, but that's another story. I hope I answered the question.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Isabel, for your answer. And
Qutaiba, please.
Yes, Doctor. Professor Saad, تفضل. نعم دكتور سعد، حضرتك عندك مداخلة دكتور؟ يعني حتى نختم من بعد إذن حضرتك دكتور، إذا لا يوجد أي مداخلات ممكن نختم أساتذتنا الأعزاء من بعد إذن حضراتكم.
دكتور قتيبة إذا دقيقة إذا عندك.
نعم نعم تفضل دكتور حسين. ما جاي أسمع الصراحة السيد رئيس الجامعة، الصوت غير واصل، ما جاي وصلنا صوت حضرتك دكتور سعد.
اسمعك
نعم دكتور. نعم
إذا انتهت بعد نشكر الجماعة الإخوان. We thank our guests.
نعم.
And we are happy to have them with our meeting, and we learn a lot from their experience. Thank you, and I am thankful for everyone who have attending this meeting, and we hope that we will meet in the next sessions, and we will change our learning to blended learning instead of electronic learning. Thank you very much, Dr. Qutaiba.
دكتور سعد إذا دقيقة بدون زحمة.
Thank you very much, Professor Saad Shaheen Hammadi, the Chancellor of Basra University. Thanks for joining us, and thanks for your questions and for your presence with us. The last question for Dr. Hussein, and then we will close the webinar. Yes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Qutaiba. I'd like to tell very important things rise from Dr. Isabel for Dr. Saad and for our university. Dr. Isabel said we need to decide which part of curriculum we will use as a teaching, which we need to use as a pair learning, and which we will use as a practice with a minimum camp visitor. So this is very important. We need to start now to talk with our college to put a schedule for this in a detail, which part we need to use it as a learning, which part we need to use it as a pair interaction, and which part we need to use it as a practical, not just a main title. We need to put this in a detailed schedule, and this is very important, I think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Hussein. Finally, right, that's all about webinar today. And I'd like to thank our guest speakers, Professor Isabel from Malta and Dr. Rita Mujtabazadeh from Iran, and Dr. Ain Mohammadi from Iran. And thanks for Dr. Murtada Al-Musafir and Dr. Jawad Al-Khurasani. Thanks for your efforts, for nice presentations, for good information, and many thanks for our attendees. I hope we will meet again in the future in more hot topics about the e-learning and blended learning. And thank you, see you, and goodbye. في امان الله جميعا. حضور الكرام شكرا جزيلا لحضراتكم. شكرا للسيد رئيس الجامعة لحضوره معنا طيلة فترة المؤتمر. في امان الله.
Thank you, Dr. Isabel.
Thank you all. It was wonderful talking to you. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Thank you, Professor.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور.
السلام.
شكرا جزيلا على إدارتك للجلسات بحرفية تامة، وإن شاء الله نتمنى لك التوفيق بالمستقبل.
الله يحفظك دكتور. شكرا جزيلا لحضورك دكتور. حضرتك مشغول واكيد يعني، بس احنا الحمد لله يعني حضورك هم ينطي لنا دافع معنوي. شكرا جزيلا دكتور لحضرتك. دكتورة هنا كذلك شكرا جزيلا دكتورة هنا الحاضرة دائما في كل الأحداث. الله يحفظكم جميعا. في أمان الله.
شكرا جزيلا دكتور قتيبة. الله
في أمان
يخليك.
الله.
مع السلامة.
مع السلامة.